Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
We are so grateful for your presence today. We recognize that it is Father's Day, and that we may be between some families and a steak dinner. We also recognize that it's Juneteenth, and there are all kinds of celebrations going on. So we're grateful to have so many of our electeds here today. But we are grateful more than anything for the gathering of community, because today we're going to focus on community. It won't be about any of our elected officials. It won't be about me as a pastor. It won't be about this church. But it will be about the thing that we're in a church. I will speak in this language. It will be about the fact that God is the author and creator of community, and God is still recreating community even after something like urban renewal. So my name is Reverend Tim Warner. I'm proud to be the pastor here at Emory Grove Church. We've been around here since the 1800s. And really, that's the point of today. This place, this earth, this geography has a history. And it is a history that is marvelous. It starts out of what is essentially reconstruction of freed slaves gathering here on land that they got from farmers who were here to establish a town, a community, a culture, out of which grew a town that thrived with God at the center of it, a town that built this church, a town that hosted the largest camp meeting in the mid-Atlantic for decades here, a town that was rich in relationships, that is rich in history, that at some point in time, you'll hear it described speaker after speaker today, all who have some nexus to this story, that at some point in time, the town was raised because of urban renewal. I can best describe it as, I think, our county's best policy effort at the time that failed miserably, left people without places that they owned to live, really created an environment where, for a long period of time in this county, passively or actively, we deposited much of Montgomery County's poverty right here in this place. And I'm proud to say that since I've been here, a vision has emerged from God through this community that is forward-thinking enough to know that we are not here alone and that we need to recreate community, but centered enough on this history to know that there was an ethic in that community that mattered more than anything in the world. It was the kind of place where if you lock your door at night, your neighbors would be insulted, because that's not the way they operated in that community. It was the kind of community where every child belonged to every single adult in the community. It was the kind of community where nobody was ever hungry, because not only could you pick fruit from the grove or vegetables from the grove itself, every house was open for you, and you would always be able to have a meal put in front of you. That's what Emory Grove used to be. And the people here long for that sense of community again. What we have done here is heard from God about what is to be. And so we have been working for 5, 6, 7 years now to make sure we acquire land here, to make sure that we have been faithful enough to the vision, where today we are happy to announce what you will hear. There will be 450 or 500 new homes built here on this land very soon. There are partnerships now between the church and the community and the government. All of us have a self-interest in making this go correctly this time. So we're standing up a nonprofit that has all the community represented at the nonprofit to guide this work so that we get it right this time. So we're thankful today to have so many who have gathered. You'll be hearing the story on and off as I speak and introduce people. One of the primary partners here is the Housing Opportunities Commission. And the gentleman that I'm about to ask to step forward and speak to us, Mr. Roy Priest, was around for urban renewal. He's been a great leader around affordable housing in this county for decades, and we are thankful to have him here to talk to us about HOC's interest in this project. So would you welcome with me Mr. Roy Priest?
Thank you very much, Reverend Warner. You know, it is very interesting to be standing in a pulpit as a priest. Because usually a pastor and a priest don't know how to get out of the pulpit. And so I'm very honored to be here with such a luminary as Reverend Warner. You know, I have in my life, I have worked with a lot of ministers. But it was the excitement and power of Reverend Warner when we first got together talking about Heritage Emory Grove that really drove what we're doing today. It was his passion and commitment to this community that's the reason we got together and formed a partnership between HOC, the county, and the church, and this community. So I want to thank all of you all for coming out. I want to thank, first of all, other members of the commission who are here. I see Jackie Simon, and I see Fran Kelleher, who are here as members of our commission. Also, I want to acknowledge members of our staff who are here. Kaveen Brown, who is our acting executive director. I saw Zachary Marks. Where's Zachary? I saw him and his family in the back. And also other members of HOC staff who are present. I want to acknowledge all of you all because it's their hard work, coupled with what's been going on with the vision and leadership that led us to this point. I want to also acknowledge and thank Sidney Katz, who's here, Hans Reamer, also Andrew Friesen, and Mark Ehrlich. You know, Mark and I have, through my presence with HOC, have formed, I think, a fond friendship and partnership and relationship. And when Mark got excited about this property and excited about this project, I knew that we had a winner. So I want to thank Mark very much for his leadership in this area. Also, Ruben, Jeffrey D., Carolyn Taylor. Carolyn, where's Carolyn? At our first meeting, the thing that I remember the most was Carolyn Taylor telling the story. You know, and in this community of Emory Grove, storytelling is a very powerful part of the heritage of this community. And we need to do more of that storytelling and capitalizing that in what we do. I also want to take a moment just to acknowledge a young man who grew up with my sons in our neighborhood in Tamarack Triangle, who I see here, Perry Paler. It's not a political announcement, this is a friendship announcement to acknowledge that I know you're present here today, so thank you. On June the 19th, 1865 was truly a day of jubilee in Galveston, Texas, when thousands of Union troops under the leadership of General Gordon Granger marched through Texas announcing the end of the Civil War and the end of slavery for some 250,000 enslaved African people. The announcement came with the caveat that African Americans had been freed on January the 1st, 1863, when President Abraham Lincoln issued an executive order that most of us know as the Emancipation Proclamation. There was no social media in those days, so the enslaved African people in Texas didn't get the word about their freedom until 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation was signed. As we celebrate the one-year anniversary of Juneteenth Day, or Day of Jubilee, being recognized as a federal holiday, it is fitting that here in Gaithersburg, Maryland, more than 150 years later, it is indeed a day of jubilee for us as we pay homage to the past by announcing a reimagined community, one marked by perseverance, fortitude, and ingenuity of the original Emory Grove community. Today we are here to unveil the plans for the Heritage Emory Grove redevelopment. It will be an exciting project designed to reconnect the past as we create an exciting path to the future. Montgomery County has a long-standing and well-documented tradition of honoring and preserving its rich history. We see that in projects such as the renaming of Joshua Henson Parkway and the Josiah Henson Museum and Park located in North Bethesda, and designated a number of other locations in African American heritage sites throughout Montgomery County. So today, as we share our plans for the Heritage Emory Grove redevelopment, our commitment is to imitate and reimagine the stories many of us have heard at once thriving and self-sustaining community as we look to build a stronger, brighter future. With the help and vision of Reverend Tim Warner and the Emory Grove United Methodist Congregation, descendants of our legacy families, many of them you know, the Chambers, the Braxtons, the Duvals, the Johnsons, the Lancasters, the Taylors, the Tylers, and so many others, and our partnerships with the Montgomery County government, the Housing Opportunities Commission board and staff, and Habitat for Humanity. We are delighted to share our vision for the Heritage Emory Grove redevelopment. With the Emory Grove United Methodist Church serving as a focal point or our centerpiece for this redevelopment, the Reimagine Heritage Emory Grove redevelopment will have a town center feel featuring affordable, market-rate homes, senior rental apartments, and mixed-use housing and commercial space. The overall look and concept of Heritage Emory Grove is indeed to be reminiscent of the original Emory Grove. A central component of the redevelopment will pay tribute to the past by promoting the notion of self-sufficiency, which was one of the hallmarks of the original founders of Emory Grove. Heritage Emory Grove achieved this recreating by putting in what will be walking paths, providing space for community gardens, and engaging with residents through sports and recreational activities. We just last week, I think, talked about the renewal of the old ball field. I'm going to bring back the barnstorming teams. I'm too old to play in those games today, but it was a time when I would have enjoyed, but I will now enjoy being a spectator when the new stadium opens up to our new ball field. As I stated in my press release, we at HOC proudly announced the Heritage Emory Grove redevelopment project, which will enhance the area while honoring the history and ethics of its founders and the residents who thrived to have and will be here for generations. I want to thank all of you all, especially the community, for coming out, because without your support, without your continuing involvement, we would not have gotten to the point where we are today, and we would not be advancing what's going to become a multi-year project to restore housing, to restore recreation, to create walking paths, to reimagine what we were. I was surprised when Reverend Warner said I was associated with urban renewal. I said, he must have looked back in my history because I started my career 57 years ago working in an urban renewal project in Washington, D.C. And the thing that I celebrate about that it was a response to what had happened in the country of the destruction and deterioration of neighborhoods and communities. And so the area that I was responsible for was a total redevelopment of affordable housing. And we built 1,861 units in the area in Washington, D.C., all attributable to affordable housing. So I come from an honored legacy, Reverend Warner, that we tried to do it right. And I hope that what we can do is learn from what we have done, the mistakes that we have made, not to repeat them. And to make sure we can all come back here in a few years and celebrate walking into some new housing, into a new recreation center, and into a new ball field, and all the other amenities that are going to be built into this community when we celebrate in a few years. So thank you all very much. And I'm honored to be here.
I'm going to invite the Honorable Sidney Katz to come to address us in a moment. But as he does, I thought about the ridiculousness of trying to introduce Sidney Katz anywhere in the Gaithersburg vicinity. Everyone knows him, and I knew immediately when God began bubbling up this vision in this church who I needed to call first, because I knew two things about Sidney Katz. One is when I call, he answers his telephone all the time. Because of relationships with people. He does public service the way he does it. And I also knew that all the places I was going to tell him about, he had already been. So when you hear today about the Do Drop In, I don't know whether he was, he may have walked by it once or twice in his childhood. When we talk about the school, he was there. He knows he has relationships with people who are here, and we are honored today to have him come and address us as a sitting council member. So would you welcome with me, Council Member Sidney Katz.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you so very much for allowing me to be a part of today's celebration. For those of you who are lucky enough to not know me, I actually was the mayor of Gaithersburg for 16 years. I was born in Gaithersburg. My mother was born in Gaithersburg. I was on the city council before that, and I have to tell you that I went, and I know this is going to be a shock to people, but I went to kindergarten in 1955. I know people are going to think I'm much older than that, but I went in 1955, and Montgomery County integrated its schools in 1956. There are people sitting in this audience today, in this sanctuary today, who I went to school with. Greg Wims and I became third grade members. I'm not going to go through it. Carolyn Taylor's going to speak later, but there's so many of us who are classmates that are here. But I also have to tell you that Montgomery County integrated its schools. We were bused. My brother and I were bused to Longview, which is a couple blocks down from here, from Gaithersburg Elementary, the 3rd and 4th grades. But Montgomery County Public Schools integrated, but Montgomery County didn't integrate. And we, as I was talking about this today, because of the history of today's event, it brought back a lot of memories, some of which are pretty disgusting, but it brought back a lot of memories. We couldn't go to we could eat lunch in school together, but we couldn't go to the movies together. I mean, it just makes no sense. But this is what happened during our lifetime, my lifetime, in Montgomery County, Maryland. When Emory Grove was gutted, and that's what happened here. And it could have been that people thought that this was a good idea, but in the early 60s, when Gaithersburg was a very small place, and I always like to mention that Montgomery Blair High School was the largest high school in 1960s in Montgomery County. It had more students, or close to having more students go to it than Gaithersburg had in its town. That's how small we were. Everybody knew everybody's family, but my family had a store. We knew everybody's family. We were a family, and I always talk about it. And my colleagues, who you're going to hear from in a few moments, have heard me say 1 zillion times. It's going to be 1 zillion and one right now. That I've always believed that a community is a family, and what happened to Emory Grove is that people really ruined a family. As Reverend Tim was talking about, Emory Grove was a very close place, and of course it was a very different time, but the family, the community, was one family. And when Ms. Priest was mentioning the families' names, I knew every one of them, went to school with every one of them, friendly with every one of them, and they were dispersed. They didn't come back. But one thing that they didn't do, one thing that the county didn't do, is kill the heart of Emory Grove, which is building the church that we're in right now. Thank God that stayed. You know, today is and I know they gave us 3 minutes to speak, and I know he's probably tapping his foot behind me, but today is the first step into getting us back to where we should be. We can't change the history, even though it's a sad history. We can't change the history. We can change the future, and that's exactly what we're here today to do. And I'm going to end on this one, that every dream needs a dreamer. Every dream needs a dreamer. And thank God for Reverend Tim Warner and for this church. Tim, I think you got a little bit more applause than I did. Not that I'm going, but thank God for Reverend Tim Warner and this church for keeping that dream alive. We will get to a better place. Thank you very much.
So with our partners at HOC, a lot of the work, and let me just acknowledge him now. Zach Marks is sitting over in the corner as if he had nothing to do with any of this on the back row. He and I have been on the telephone call with every sitting elected official in Montgomery County talking about this project for 2 years to get us to this point. There's so many conversations that have been had. The only entity that had more conversations with anybody was the number of people in this church who've been praying for this for 2 years, right? But he and I have had conversations with every elected official just about. One of them, when he called, got in his ear right away a bug about our baseball field. And Councilmember Hines Reamer has led the effort at County Council to make sure that money has been appropriated to make sure that that field gets back to its former glory as we do this development. And so I offer you now, Councilmember Reamer. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Warner. I'm really excited to be here to celebrate with you today the beginning of an incredible journey that is going to culminate in an amazing set of opportunities for the families here and for Montgomery County. Emory Grove is really a special place. I feel like when I'm here in this church, when I'm over at Johnson Park, it's sacred ground. You know, this is a community that has persisted and thrived through so much adversity over so many, many years. And Montgomery County has not been a great place for everyone to live throughout our history. And there are many communities in Montgomery County where they were grappling with deep racism and a government that was very hostile to creating opportunities for them. And throughout those decades, for 100 years, 150 years, these communities have provided for themselves. Families starting and running small businesses to provide jobs and income, and providing for their own education, building their own baseball fields that become the center of community and bring people from all over Montgomery County to celebrate and participate in revival services and just make a great life in spite of the conditions of that they've been presented with. As has been mentioned, the urban renewal that came through here, you know, ripped out a lot of, I sort of think of an image in my mind of ripping out a plant from the ground, and yet beneath the soil, the roots are still there, and those plants, they grow back, and they've grown back, and this development, as Mr. Priest said, this is going to be doing it right. We're going to go back, and we're going to do it right with the families, with the community, with the church, with everyone together. We're going to be bringing housing, more than 500 housing units, and HOC and Pastor Warner, they're reaching out to the families that were once displaced to find them a home here once again. That is bringing the families and the community back together. And Montgomery County government, we want to be your partner and your ally. We've expanded our pre-K just up here at Longview Elementary. The pre-K support we have for children so they can get a great education before they start kindergarten and they're ready to learn is here. We are working on affordable housing funding. So the Housing Opportunities Commission is gaining access to a significant amount of funding in order to make this partnership possible. You're going to be hearing about rebuilding the rec center and the pools and all of that. And as Pastor Warner said, many aspects of this just caught my imagination, but certainly learning about the park and the role of baseball in this community was something that just left me feeling with so much joy. And to be able to be part of finding resources to bring that history back, because that field, as you know, looks so much like it looked in the 40s and the 50s when it was the center of black baseball in Montgomery County, when teams would come from all over the East Coast to play baseball here, and some of the great legends of baseball, Willie Mays and Satchel Paige, played here. And our Parks Department is going to be putting shovels in the ground before too long. There's going to be a community process so we can engage everyone in that, and we'll find out what we all want to have happen there. But the parks process is not necessarily contingent, or it's a little bit separate from the bigger project you're working on. I know it's a little bit of an easier project, frankly. So you've got a lot of hard work ahead of you, but hopefully we'll get this baseball field going so you can enjoy it as we go through. I know many of you signed this baseball last 2 weekends ago. Was that last weekend, Pastor Warner? It was last weekend. Time is flying. It's a blur. I have many, starting with Milt Thompson, the World Series champion who grew up in this community and played for the Phillies. He signed the ball, but then I had to have Pastor Warner sign it, and then I had to have, many, many people sign it. So if you haven't signed it, I would love to have you sign it because it's a memento of Emory Grove and the history of baseball in the community. And I can't wait to come back to break ground and to ribbon cut and see this project moving forward. So thank you for everything you're doing. It's a pleasure to be able to support you as we move through this. And thank you to my colleagues for their support in helping make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Reamer. I'm proud to bring to the podium next Councilmember Andrew Friesen, who is uptown in Montgomery County today. He is down in Bethesda, south, inclines much more south in our county than he is now. But I'm grateful for his leadership on county council, to the extent that when we were looking for someone to help lead some of the zoning text amendments that will help us to construct construct houses that look like the vision that God has created here, he signed up immediately and said, look, I'd like to sponsor that bill and help it get through county council. So welcome with me, Councilmember Andrew Friesen.
Well, I am so honored and humbled and grateful to be here. I'm so inspired to be here. It's fitting that we're here to talk about this project. We're here in this historic church, in this historic community, on Juneteenth and on Father's Day. Now, on Juneteenth, we celebrate freedom, not just freedom on paper, but freedom in reality, freedom that is actually experienced, not just a proclamation of emancipation, but the fact of emancipation, a fact that we're still working on getting right, that we still have quite a lot of work to do, and that's why we're here today. And we're also talking about Father's Day. And Father's Day is about family. Families make up communities, and thinking about how many family gatherings, how many Father's Day were celebrated in this community, in Emory Grove, in one of the most vibrant black communities in the country. Not just here in Montgomery County, but all across the East Coast, all across the country. There used to be 10,000 people every year who would descend on this community from all over the area, all over the country, to talk about these things, talk about community, talk about freedom, to talk about moving the ball forward. And so it is just so fitting that we were here. This is a community, and this is a church, and this is a place that represents obstacle after obstacle after obstacle, and a community that has overcome those obstacles. The fact that this church is standing here is in and of itself an act of defiance, an act of civil disobedience. You try to plow over a community, this community still stands. And so in the face of urban renewal, we're here to talk about community renaissance. This is about the resurrection of a community that once stood as strong as any community anywhere, and is once again going to stand in that type of strength, with that type of love, with that type of commitment. And so I'm just so honored to be able to play a small role in this, to be part of how we change the narrative. We have to be as intentional of changing the structures as those structures were intentional being put in place in the first place. It's not an accident. This wasn't by chance. This is by choices. Intentional, deliberate choices that were made for why a community, a once great, thriving, vibrant community, has gotten to where it is. And so we have to be just as intentional. We have to be the same way in 1958 when the county government passed an ordinance that said that there had to be all sewer, and then said, but we're not going to pay for it. And here's the $1 million bill to a community that had no chance in being able to pay for that bill. That was no accident. And so it is the same county government, the same public agencies that need to step up to be part of the solution. Imagine what could happen. Imagine if the county government, rather than being the obstacle, helped to create the opportunities. That's why we're here. That's why we're joined together. That's why we are part of a partnership. And this is a partnership that comes from Bethesda and goes to Poolesville and goes to Olney and is throughout Montgomery County, because it's going to take an entire county to build back the community that once stood here. And no longer is this going to be an isolated community that fends for itself, which it did and was fully capable of until the county came in to destroy it. This is a community that is going to be part of the broader community, intrinsically linked to who we are in Montgomery County. That's the commitment that we're making. That is the value that we share. And I am so proud, so honored to be part of it, and so grateful to Pastor Warner for his leadership, his vision, his love. Love is not a noun, it's a verb. And he lives it. And with Housing Opportunities Commission, and with county government, and with colleagues working on the legislative changes that we need to make, ensuring the funding that this is going to require, having the commitment of the executive branch and the county council and all of our public agencies, we are going to resurrect this community. We are going to create the renaissance that this community deserves, and we are going to be part of the solution to the problems we created. We were part of the problem, perhaps the problem. We can be part of the solution together. So thank you so much for allowing me to be part of it.
Thank you, Councilmember Friesen. In the book of Nehemiah, in the first chapter, somebody just gasped up. I already preached today. We're not going to church. But here's the story there, right? Nehemiah sees what's going on in his home country, Israel. His heart is convicted about it. And he goes to see the king. And says, King, listen, this is what's going on. And the king says wisely to him, Nehemiah, I see your heart. What do you need? And gives him a letter to go and do what he needs to do. After some time, as the Nehemiah of this place, God has put me in that role here. I sought out to see the king, and when I finally caught up with him, I knew I'd have to bring out my heavy hitter. So I rounded up Carolyn Taylor, who knows everything there is to know about Emory Grove. And I was away in Houston, Texas at some meeting or another, and via Zoom, we got together with the county executive. And by the end of the meeting, after he had heard Carolyn, I don't know how compelled he was by what I said, but he said, Reverend Warner, do what you need to do in Emory Grove. So I give you our county executive, Mr. Mark Elrich.
So, it's really nice to be here this weekend. You know, it's Father's Day. It's actually Juneteenth, but I've been saying it's Juneteenth for the last 3 days. We've been doing Juneteenth celebrations for 3 days now. And this is really an important day for Montgomery County. I want to start by saying, you know, we have some pretty amazing people here. I had already talked to Carolyn Taylor because I'd been in the picnic and she told me everything about Emory Grove in great detail, and I really appreciated the lesson over the food and over the companionship there. And it's a great way to learn. It's not an informal discussion about what do you want and why do you want it, but just sitting down and talking over a table about this is my community and why it meant something to me and why it still means something. And it was just really good for me to get that kind of understanding. I grew up in a neighborhood in Silver Spring. I went to Montgomery Hills Junior High School. Across the street from Montgomery Hills Junior High School on the road that goes, I think, Littonsville Road, there was a neighborhood without running water and outside toilets. And when I was in school, it was called Monkey Hollow. I didn't understand what that was about because I hadn't thought about things like that until I got a little bit older and I realized what this was. And by the time they were done with it, it had all been displaced. The black families lost their land cheaply and incredibly expensive houses went up there. And then you realized what the game was. And I'll say, a couple of things. One is, I don't believe for a second that the mistakes of urban removal were mistakes. I think for the most part, people knew damn well what they were doing. And other than people like Roy Priest, who were in a position to stand up and say, no, we're going to do this the right way, it proceeded across the country in the worst possible way. And I knew about that a long time ago. Urban removal was not something that people looked forward to because it really disrespected the communities. And I will say something about the Emancipation Proclamation, because I don't know how many people realize this, but that proclamation had an expiration date. But you got to remember that Lincoln did free the slaves 6 months after he issued the proclamation. And if the Confederate States had returned to the Union, there would have been no Emancipation Proclamation. Let's not be confused about American history. Nobody likes to talk about this, but that war was not fought to free slaves. It was fought for something else. And when they realized the British, since the British had already outlawed slavery and they had no dog in this fight, if America wasn't going to get rid of slavery, they had no compunction about siding with the South. And so the move to do the emancipation was a way to keep the British out of the war, and that's where that comes from. So Lincoln did a lot of great things, and he ran a really great war, but his intentions did not start out being what they wound up being. And I think it's important for people to know that. Everybody is flawed. There are no saints. There are no saints. Everybody has issues, and Lincoln had issues too. And I think it's important to know that. He freed the people he freed the people that he couldn't free. The people in the Deep South, where we had no military presence and we had not overthrown the Confederate governments, they stayed slaves. The people in Maryland that was occupied by the federal government, those slaves were not freed. The slaves in the border states were not freed. The people he could have freed, he did not free. And the people he couldn't free, he declared were free. So just keep that in mind as we think about this. I think, this is part of the history that makes some people uncomfortable, but it is our history, and we have to own our history. And I cannot resist talking about that because it grieves me for people when I talk to people who don't realize the complexity of how freedom moved forward here. This community was seriously wronged. And so when Reverend Warner came to me, and Carolyn talked to me about this, I looked at the land the county owned, and I'm like, I don't want money for this. I said, you're not going to pay for something that was stolen from you. That seemed a bit odd to me. And I felt we had a responsibility to restore the property to this area so it could be used for a purpose that would be meaningful and help this community rebuild. And I'm really glad to have the partnership that we have, because Montgomery County government couldn't do it by themselves. We need HOC, we need the parks. All of us have a place to play in this, and I'm really proud of the fact that everybody is going to play a role in this. I want to thank Roy Priest. Roy and I have had an opportunity to talk a lot. I will say that he has brought a breath of fresh air to HOC. I see a renewed focus on affordable housing writ large. I see a person who's not willing to settle for crumbs and think they got a good deal. I see a person who's dedicated to provide as much affordable housing as we can and to make the best deals that we can in order to help the people who need the help the most. And so I've been looking forward to working with him. He has been remarkable so far. And I really do think it's a breath of fresh air, and it's reflected in your organization. You can feel the difference when you talk to people about things. Zach Marks has been great to work with on this stuff. So I feel a new day's coming, and here we are in a place where a new day is arriving. We know what's going to happen here. We don't know the details. I can't tell you the layout and the shape of the buildings and everything, but we know that this is going to be significant. It's going to restore 500 homes here. It's going to build a complete community. We're going to do something with that rec center and make sure that it is rebuilt in a more prominent way and provide more services to this community. And we're going to look at it as an opportunity to put housing on top of it as well. Amen. So It's an opportunity for us to do the right thing and do the right thing at scale. This is the proudest project that I'm a part of in Montgomery County. We haven't done anything at this scale. We haven't done anything as bold as this before. We haven't done anything as intentional as this before. That's what makes this significant. But this community has suffered a lot of intentional wrongs. And so the opposite of intentional wrongs has to be intentional rights, and they have to be at the same scale. The wrongs that destroyed the community have to be matched by rights that'll rebuild the community. And that's what we're going to do here in partnership with Reverend, in partnership with HOC. Montgomery County is going to play its role. Park and Planning will play its role. We will bring this back. We will bring it back in a way that everybody can be proud of it. We're going to bring it back in a way where the families can be families and they can reach out together and hopefully get to the point once more when we have unlocked doors. I actually remember those days. It would be nice to go there again. You know, it would be nice for all of us to be able to go there again. We want to make sure that happens here. We want to make sure that we do the right thing here. So I promise you that we will make sure on our part that everything that is needed will be provided, and the support, moral and otherwise, will be there when you need it. So thank you very much. Tim, thank you for everything you're doing here.
Thank you, County Executive Elrich. I mentioned before that we talked to an awful lot of people, and we weren't silly. We talked to the people that really matter. Most of us don't know it in this county because we really don't have an opportunity to get engaged with our planning board at this level. But if you want to do anything in terms of building buildings in Montgomery County, there's a plan for it. We all love how nice this county is in so many different ways, and we sort of gripe against all the rules that we come up with, but we like living in the niceness that they create. I am grateful that early in our going we had a chance to talk with Carol Ruben, and she did her planning board thing in the conversation. She asked all the hard questions. This is great, but, and have you thought about this, and have you thought about that? I was so grateful for her input because she wants to do what's best for people in the planning that she's doing. And so we're grateful to have her here today to speak on behalf of Montgomery County Planning Board. Would you welcome Carol Ruben?
Good afternoon. As Pastor said, I'm Carol Ruben, and I'm actually one of the newer members of the Planning Board. But I've been working in the Planning Department and the Parks Department for about 16 years. And I love to see projects complete. And I can't tell you, when I applied for the Planning Board, I did it because Montgomery County government has finally owned its history. And what we've owned is your history because you all are part of the county. And it makes me proud to be part of learning from that history. It's not about, we all make mistakes, but owning those mistakes and making them right and doing what we can is the most important part. And that's why I'm in public service, and that's why I think it's so important for these projects. There are several projects. In addition to the Planning Board, we also manage and operate the parks within Montgomery County. So I think what we're doing is it's a combination. So it's a partnership of the county government, it's a partnership of HOC, the community, and we can finally look at all the incredible cultural and historic resources that we have here that will benefit you all and will benefit the community at large. So we recognize those valuable cultural resources in the church, in camp meeting events, in schools, at the baseball fields, and the stories of the past and present of this important community. And we value those. So in 1974, Johnson's local park it was acquired in 1974, and it's going to be one of the first parks included in a program that we have called our Untold Stories Initiatives, which is a project highlighting historically significant stories for Montgomery County's diverse communities. Mr. Priest mentioned storytelling and how important it is to this community, and I think that we're adopting that in the Park and Planning Commission. So what we're going to do on the park side, and of course the planning for this really incredible project, I'm looking forward to approving getting so many more affordable housing units in the county and restoring this community to a place that it deserves. So, but we're also doing Johnson's Park, and it will be as I said, it's one of the first parks in our initiative for storytelling, but we're going to construct what's called a walk-through history, and that is an ADA accessible paved trail with interpretive signage to tell the story of this park's remarkable history. Additionally, we're implementing improvements to the park through our Park Refresher program. We're going to include conversion of the existing softball field to the baseball field where that was the history of this project, of this park, was the baseball field that was developed by the community. We'll provide a new outfield fence, scoreboard. We're going to convert some of the tennis courts to soccer, and we're going to restore the basketball courts. We're going to create some new pickleball courts. We're going to That's great. Yeah, if pickleball is like the new thing, everybody, for those of us whose knees can't handle it, it's something that we should all try. So we want to do pickleball courts, lighting upgrades, picnic shelters, walkways, and parking lot improvements. So Johnson's Park is going to be an amazing addition to the community that we're recreating. And as an important site in the local African American history, it's appropriate for Johnson's local park to be one of the first parks we are highlighting as part of this Untold Stories initiative. So our parks are rich in history, and through interpretation and commemoration, we can bring many of those stories back to life. And I look forward not only to approving these projects as they come to the board, but I look forward to attending the first demonstration game on a renovated baseball diamond at Johnson's local park. So, with that, I want to wish you all who celebrate a happy Father's Day and a happy Juneteenth. Thank you.
As you take your seat, Carol, I want to just put another piece of vision in your memory. There was at one point in time a tabernacle where we used to worship in Johnson Park, and we are going to be asking you about a place, an outdoor venue, an amphitheater called the Tabernacle for everyone to use, so we could have that outdoor stuff happen. But we'll talk to you about that very soon. When the vision came about housing, what came to my mind immediately were two things. The first was housing as a way to do reparations. And before you gasp at this term that nobody wants to talk about, everybody talks about reparations. Everybody gets stuck in the conversation because nobody knows how to do it. But I immediately saw a way to do it in what I always do, linking nonprofits and governments and businesses together and communities together through Habitat for Humanity. Habitat has a model where they provide affordable housing through home ownership. It's very, very different from everybody else's. And the idea here is that families who have not had an opportunity to own a home may be able to own a home, move into a home with a 0% mortgage, a 1% down payment, and equity built into the deal. If you are like me, I don't come from much, but the little bit of wealth that we've been able to acquire over the years has come from equity in homes that we have bought and sold. And that's what the people who are in Emory Grove have been missing. And so through partnering with Habitat, we have discovered a way to provide reparations. We are repairing what had happened in the past, so that families will be able to build generational wealth who have not had an opportunity to do that. And so I'm thankful to have Habitat for Humanity as a partner. We welcome Mr. Jeff D., President and CEO of Habitat for Humanity, Metro Maryland. Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. Thank you, everybody, for the opportunity to be here. I want to highlight, or I want to thank first the elected officials, and I think it's important that we sometimes begrudge officials or politicians who don't do what we think is the best thing, but I think we need to call out elected officials when they do the right thing and they take a stand. And we're grateful for the leadership of the county executive and the county council that put a record $140 million into the Housing Initiative Fund and another $50 million into HOC's Housing Production Fund. And it's really important that they took a stand and they made it happen. And so we're very grateful for Hans and Sydney and Andrew and Mark Elbridge for their support and everybody else on the county council. I also want to thank Emory Grove, Reverend Warner, for considering Habitat for Humanity as a partner. We're very grateful for the opportunity to partner with you all. And of course, Housing Opportunities Commission, who we have been excited to partner with and work with, and there's a lot of different opportunities that we're talking about and that are coming down the pike, and we're very grateful for that. So just two things to sort of start today. Psalm 127, unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain. And then from Habitat for Humanity International, everyone deserves a foundation on which to build a home. And so the seed of Habitat for Humanity was planted on a small farm in rural Georgia during the 1930s and 40s. It was called Koinonia Farm. And the purpose of Koinonia Farm, it was to be a demonstration project of first century Christianity, whites and blacks living together. And it's not funny, but the funny thing is, no one had a problem when the whites and blacks were working together. No one had a problem when they were living together. It's when they started eating together. That's when the violence started. And it's that symbolic coming together over a meal, that lack of a better, that intimacy where you can understand the other person and you can get to know them and you can start to see that it's not the color of their skin, it's the person, who that person is, him or her. And from that beginning, it was started by a man named Clarence Jordan. And there were 4 lessons that infuse Habitat today. First is radical inclusivity. Habitat for Humanity is all about bringing people together. White, black, Jew, Gentile, doesn't matter. No faith, whatever. And Millard Fuller, who founded Habitat, called it the theology of the hammer. That it doesn't matter what creed you have, what matters is our agreement on the need for decent and affordable housing. So radical inclusivity, bringing people together. The second lesson is that of partnership housing, and it's important to emphasize partnership housing. People coming together to build a house with people, not for. It's very important language, with people in need, and then paying it forward. So 3 people, 4 families come together, build the house, extend a mortgage. That person starts paying the mortgage, or that family starts paying the mortgage, and that proceeds is brought together with money raised, and they start the next one and the next one. The third lesson is biblical economics. No profit. Habitat makes no profit. A lot of times we lose money. Well, actually, not a lot. We always lose money on houses that we sell, and that's why we joke, but that's why the role of the county government is so crucial, and we have a lot of support from corporations, but we need the fundraising and the grants and the support of the county to make this happen, because otherwise it can't happen. So we're very grateful for that. And this is one of the most important things I would say is it has to be community-led. It has to be grassroots. And it has to be the people coming together and saying, this is what we want, not the government or people higher up saying, this is what you need. So we want the people, we want the community to say, this is what we want to do. So Habitat was founded in 1976, Millard and Linda Fuller, not Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter was our most famous volunteer, and he still volunteers to this day. Every year he goes out and volunteers. Actually, it's a funny story. He gets annoyed when people come up and want to take his picture. He's like, don't take my picture, because the more you take my picture, the less time you're actually working. He's a great guy. And so Millard and Linda Fuller took these principles and he put them into action. They put them into action. Habitat came to Montgomery County in 1982 when a small group of grassroots supporters wanted to work with hardworking families to build decent and affordable housing. So since 1982, in Montgomery County, we've built 90 homes with hardworking families. Which is kind of cool, but then when you think about it, when you realize all the work that has to be done, 90 isn't that much, but we're getting there. You gotta start somewhere. We've issued approximately $10 million worth of zero interest mortgages. We are the bank, we issue the mortgage. And we've spent about $15 million in construction spending over those years, and that's been in Montgomery County. In 2014, just up the road, we built the Maple Hill community, right up the road, 19 townhomes, $5.5 million project. Prices have gotten a little more expensive now, but that community is thriving. There are kids that have grown up and have gone off to college, Brown University, other places, because of the opportunities that was there. And then today we come to this exciting day to celebrate the Heritage Emory Grove Redevelopment Project. We're very gratified to be part of this broad collaboration between local government, nonprofits, and the faith community. And this is an excellent example, and it's a really important example, of how faith communities in Montgomery County can utilize their assets, land, to create a ministry of justice in affordable housing. By providing the land, Habitat can then partner with the local government, HOC, do fundraising to provide affordable housing and work in partnership with men and women. Now, we know that just as we're excited to build houses, we also are excited of the community building aspect of Heritage Emory Grove. And we believe that's a key part of what is going to make this development a success, is the community. And there are two other elements I want to just talk about. One is the tenacity of the community. You cannot read the history of this community and not see the tenacity. Mr. Priest talked about self-sufficiency, which is true, but the tenacity of the men and women and children, year after year after year, to stick with it. They could have given up. They could have walked away, but they said, no, we're going to stay here. And that tenacity is what is going to help make this a success. And the last element is intentionality, and some people have already talked about intentionality. But this project is important because it provides all of us the opportunity to be intentional in our actions to rectify past harms. Just as urban renewal in the 60s and 70s was intentional, so we are going to be intentional to fix mistakes of the past. In our county, there is a 32% gap in the home ownership rates of white households and Black and African American households. 32%. And we know that white households have 10 times the wealth of Black households. When the primary way to build wealth in this country is home ownership, and historic actions and existing systems perpetuate this disparity, we must act with targeted intentionality. And that is what this project enables us all to do. Build community, demonstrate the tenacity of the community, and then be intentional in the pursuit of justice. And we're so grateful for this opportunity, and we look forward to the many years of working with you all and helping to build decent and affordable housing. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Finally, we want to invite to the podium Carolyn Taylor of the Taylor family. If you're not from Emory Grove, you need to know that I have the privilege of pastoring 5 generations of Taylors. They are here. Emory Grove belongs to them and 4 or 5 other prominent families in that town. And she often reminds me that I grew up over there. She points to where the house was. There's a place called the Big House. I think there's a picture of it here somewhere. But the point of that is this. growing up in the Taylor house has produced her as a leader in this community. She is a founding member of the historic Emory Grove Rotary Club that partners with us. You can clap for them, amen. Are the members of the Rotary Club here? I just invite you to raise your hand so folks can see who you are. Not only is she leading there, she's a leader in our congregation, but also a leader in the nonprofit that we are standing up now, called Heritage Emory Grove Community Development Corporation, that will lead the development of it. We are a pretty good church, but we are terrible at building buildings. So we've gotten some people who have some expertise and some will, and some folks who have a stake in our community to come together to be a part of that. And Carolyn has also graced us by joining that board. So members of the Heritage Emory Grove Board, if you're here, if you would just raise your hand so people can see you. Thank you. You've already heard her impact in telling stories to people about Emory Grove. And so we're grateful to have had her as one of the leaders who continues to gather momentum for this movement. So Carolyn, will you come up and join us? Please? Thank you.
What a wonderful day this is. First, I'd like to say Happy Father's Day to all fathers out there. All right, and then we've also got Juneteenth, and I'd like to acknowledge that and to acknowledge the fact of freedom for people. I grew up in a house where my great-grandmother lived, and she was a slave. And so, you know, I have that personal contact and that personal history and the history of slaves coming through camp meeting and people gathering. And what they got after slavery was land. They got the land. They built a community. They started church. They started schools. They had a doctor's office. They had grocery stores. They had community. They had sports. And that land was taken away. And so we're here today to acknowledge that we can't bring back the past, never. We can never get Emory Grove back, but Emory Grove is a place of the heart. It's a spiritual place that we visit, that we remember that people were honorable. They spoke to each other in respectful terms and used in respectful words. Their goal, their main goal was to build a future for their families. That was the goal. And so now we know that we have been scattered just like everybody else, but we still have that base of the church here. Reverend Warner came into Emory Grove. He came in, he saw some confusion here, he shook his head, but then he got to know the people, and he got to know the history, and he got to know and to understand who we are and what happened here. And he got to feel that people still had that loving feeling. And the places that you're sitting in right now, they're sacred places. This church was built by hand by those men and women who just decided they were going to build a community of faith for their children. And if you look, we opened up one of the walls one day, and we saw logs from the trees that were cut in half. They still have the bark on them. They're still up in this building. They still have the bark on them, and that's how, you know, they worked together. They used what they had. They used their hands. I also want to acknowledge that Reverend had a dream. He had a vision. We wanted and needed help. We missed opportunities to get together and improve things for ourselves. And right now we have somebody who was a leader who came, that God sent him to us to get this whole thing moving. And we just want to just thank Reverend Warner. We lift him up because it hasn't been easy for him. You know, he started out and he was just ignored over and over and over again, and then finally folks started returning his calls and things started happening. I also want to acknowledge today Greg Wims, who had a vision in his heart when he was just a little child, and he was in a situation where he needed help. And people helped him and lifted him up and raised him up so that he is the man that he is today. And Greg has been working tirelessly. And he has involved the county council, the county executive, the county council to know the story of Emory Grove. And when they heard it, they acted. And I'm so appreciative of County Executive Mark Elrich when he came out and he met the people and he was hearing things that he never heard before, even though he just lived a stone's throw down the street, he never heard it before. And so he just heard about the pain and the agony, about the tears, about, we had all that going on. We had a lot of good times in Emory Grove, but we had suffering. We had people, when people were hurt, the whole community was hurt. We cried together, we prayed together. And that's what my job has been, is to stand on a watchtower and to pray and to talk to people and to let them know that they have value, that they have a beautiful history, that they need to know their own personal history, that they need to know the history of their community and their cities, but they also need to know the history of the world. And so that's how we rise up. That's how we get together. We know who we are. We know that we've come through some things. Juneteenth is a signal that, we are survivors and we have been here a long, long time, all of us. We've survived everything. Our seed is still alive. And so we have much work to do before we leave here. And so I invite you to continue to pray for Emory Grove, to continue to remember the story, to continue to come and see what's going on, what's happening, and just to be a part of this vision. I just want to mention just that when I was a child, my vision was that there would be no race, that the world would start moving around, and there would be this great migration, and those things would fall away. Well, it's happening, but it's so painful. It's so painful. It's happening. And we thank God for that. And we thank God for all of you here and hope that you will keep the fire alive.
So the half an hour we had planned is far spent. But I need to express to each one of you how grateful I am for your presence here today. What this means is that the work that we are imagining is important to you. And as it is important to you, we pray that you will continue to stay engaged with it, to spread the word about it. We've designed the Board of Heritage Emory Grove in such a way that we will not move forward without the community. We won't have an issue about anyone objecting to what we're doing because it's going to be the community's idea. We are trying to get it right this time. And so we're grateful to God for your presence. There's a food truck out there that's waiting to feed you. So please go outside and eat. There are people, community organizations and nonprofits outside that'll have information for you that'll be helpful to you. Listen, we'll invite you back when we put a shovel in the ground. Amen. And then we're going to invite you back again when we cut the ribbon. And I look forward to that day. Thank you so much. Will you stand? I'd like to close us with a prayer before we leave. Lord God, we are ever grateful for all that you have done for us. We pray that as we go out to gather and to fellowship, that you will bless the food that's before us, make it nourishment and strength for our bodies, for the journey, Lord God, that you have in front of us. We confess to you that it's too much and too big for us individually, God, but it is just the right size for you. So have your way with it and with us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you all.